Okay, we're gonna get started because our time is short together and we have a lot of good material to cover. My name is David Farbman. I'm the Senior Director of Education at Gateways. And we're really thrilled this evening to be able to do this webinar with you and for you in a partnership with the Ruderman Foundation and the Ruderman Synagogue Inclusion Project and CJP and the Ruderman Synagogue Inclusion Program's terrific director, Molly Silver, who really helped to make this happen. A few program notes before we begin, and then I'm going to turn it over to the star of the show, my colleague Sandy Gold. First of all, this session is being recorded. There are a number of people we know who are interested in hearing about what Sandy has to say. Weren't able to make it tonight for tonight, but we are recording it. So if you do not want to be seen, you should be able to be sure to turn off your camera. We'll be keeping everyone on mute throughout the presentation, so to eliminate, to cut down on background noise. If you have a question or comment, we really invite you to use the chat function at the bottom of the screen. If you scroll down, you can see there's a chat button, and everyone can you can type questions or comments there. We'll be using the chat function throughout as well to post some additional resources based on what Sandy is talking about. With this session is also being closed captioned. And if you are interested in seeing closed captioning, you just go to the More button, and the closed captioning will appear if you click that you allow it. And you can see we've just started it now, so everyone should have access to be able to see that. Without further ado, I want to introduce my colleague Sandy Gold, who is the director of our Jewish education programs at Gateways, and a true master educator. And we have a lot to learn from her about how our virtual synagogue communities can become as inclusive as possible. And without further ado, take it away, Sandy.
Thank you, David. I am actually going to share my screen, so if you all bear with me for just a moment, I'm going to share my screen and start a PowerPoint. If at any point, for some reason, you can't hear me or there's something with my audio, use the chat or signal me so that we can try to fix that and get it going again. So one moment. Okay, great. So, okay, so it's really wonderful that so many of you logged on for this webinar this evening. It's really, this is so new for all of us. We are finding ourselves in some uncharted territories. It's one thing to plan an event that's going to be remote. It is another thing to suddenly have our whole lives become remote. And it's new for those of us that work in the field. It's new for our congregants. And it's really so impressive. And I just need to say thank you to the rabbis and the clergy and all the synagogue leaders who so quickly pivoted and jumped right in and have worked so hard to bring our synagogue communities into the remote world so that we can all still stay connected. That being said, there's so much we're all figuring out. We are figuring out how to be a community when we're not together in a physical space. And at the same time, how do we continue to recognize that some of our population needs different supports, that we are diverse, and how do we continue to do the work that we've been doing around inclusion when we're all separated physically. So that's what we're going to focus on tonight. And as David said, please use the chat feature, ask questions. If you've already figured out how to do something that we're bringing up in this conversation this evening, please share it with all of us. We are here to facilitate and start a conversation that will probably be ongoing for many, many weeks, months to come, and we can all learn from each other. So please share, and we can all begin this journey together. So when we talk about who are people with disabilities, this is the group that typically pops into people's minds. People in wheelchairs, people who are blind, issues that are very visible. Although we know from previous, from a census that actually only 96% of all people who identify as living with a disability, 96% of them are invisible, that they wouldn't be seen. So who else is included in this population that we're talking about? And it's all of these other people whose disabilities or areas of challenge might be considered invisible, or we might not think of them as needing extra support, but in reality, they do, or somebody who has acquired a disability, maybe temporarily or through an illness. And these are the people that in the past, when Gateways and Ruderman have done presentations about creating inclusive communities, we were talking about this whole group of people. But now we're finding ourselves in some new worlds. And all of a sudden, we have a community that's working remotely, that are experiencing life from home. And all of a sudden, there are some competing issues and some new challenges that we're all facing. And we don't always know the stressors that everyone else that we're dealing with in our communities are facing day to day. It's hard to assess what is going on in someone's life when you're face to face, and it's even that much harder when you're remotely and you're getting all of your information through a Zoom call, through a phone call, through an email or a text. We know that during an infectious disease outbreak, stress increases, and the stress can come from many of these, present itself in many of these ways, and it fluctuates. What you think you know about how someone is handling the stress of this time that we're living through, you might be right on target on Tuesday, but on Wednesday, it might look very different. And if you think you know what they're feeling at 10 o'clock in the morning, check back in with them at 4 o'clock, because it could be very different. Something that I really want to stress is that not only are the congregants that you are thinking about dealing with stress and these new issues, but we need to recognize that our leaders are as well. Our rabbis, our cantors, our synagogue leaders, they're dealing with the same issues. And we need to keep that in the back of our minds as we're dealing with our congregations over the next weeks and months to come. So what does this mean? It means that we really need to expand our focus of who are we talking about when we are thinking about having an inclusive community remotely. Now we need to think about people who may not have the right equipment at home, or they may not have the capabilities in order to participate in everything online. We are thinking about people who may have been our best volunteers 3 months ago, but now they're suddenly the ones that are isolated and not able to be our volunteers because they're really worried about their own health, or they are isolated and because they were living alone, and they were in a really good place when they were getting out and about every day and being actively a part of our communities, but now they're isolated. And perhaps they're not even feeling comfortable to go out and do their own food shopping. So now they're dealing with the stresses of how do I get what I need and still keep myself healthy. We have people living with other people with disabilities. Maybe it's a parent with a child or a parent with a young adult. Maybe it is somebody with a parent that they're worried about. And suddenly services that they're used to receiving for their family member are gone. You know, children who are, since schools are not meeting face-to-face, schools are trying very hard to provide services, but it's not the same thing. And suddenly children who were going to school every day need a parent sitting next to them to participate in whatever schools are offering for them, and but they're missing their services, they're missing their therapies. Home health care aides, although they are considered essential workers and allowed to continue their jobs, many of them are choosing not to. We're experiencing a shortage of health home aides right now. Their jobs often do not come with the kind of benefits or paid sick leave that you would expect, so they're kind of nervous about taking chances, or their partner and people in their home are working outside of the house, and so they're seen as being at risk to bring illness into a home, and so they can't continue their jobs. We have so many more people who are doing online deliveries now that those that are really struggling and need it, or who used to use it, are struggling to get what they need. We have entire populations in our congregations of seniors who are active and healthy and have been at the core of everything we do, but now they're suddenly considered high risk. And so where does that put them in our, you know, in when we think about who are we taking care of, where do they fit in? Before we jump into what we do with all this information, David and I are going to do a quick poll just to get a sense of who is with us tonight. We're curious to see what your point of view is that you're coming from, whether it's clergy, synagogue professionals. David, one question, do I need to share my screen back for you to do a poll?
I don't believe so. Let's see if this works. I'm gonna click to start the poll, and everyone should be able to respond very quickly, and we'll be able to tally the results. People are still plugging in their answers. We'll wait another couple of seconds. Okay. We'll end the polling now, and we'll see what we got.
So we have a lot of lay leaders and board members. I'm still curious, David, as to what the other are, but this is good for us to know who we're, so we will try really hard to focus on these areas that would be of most interest to you. But as we said, ask questions along the way and let us know what else you're looking for. Earlier this year, Gateways and the Ruderman Foundation did a similar presentation on how to help a synagogue community become more inclusive, and we posed 10 questions that a congregation could ask themselves as they work on those areas. So what we're going to do now is we've taken another look at those 10 questions. Some of them are still very relevant to the work we're doing, and we're going to remind you of them. Some of them needed to be looked at from a different angle, and so we've tweaked them, and then some of them are brand new. So we're going to look at 10 questions, and hopefully it will help all of us in thinking about how we keep our congregations inclusive while we're all meeting remotely. Oops. So the first question is, do your remote practices match your vision and mission statement? There have been 52 synagogues that have been working with the Ruderman Synagogue Inclusion Project. And as a community, we've really been actively working on creating a welcoming and inclusive vibe for people with disabilities and their families when they visit a synagogue's website or when they first initiated contact with a synagogue. And it's a different ballgame now. We're not entering the synagogue world. Everything is happening remotely. So a question for a congregation to ask themselves is, what actions can you take to keep people feeling as if they are welcome and that you will care about their individual and specific needs, even when our physical buildings are closed? Which leads into question 2. So we're gonna look at the two of them together. One of the questions we used to ask is, do you have an inclusion committee? And now that question shifts a bit to, well, what role can your inclusion committee take on while we're doing the stay home? A lot of the roles are actually the same. Taking out the tasks related to a physical building space, a lot of the tasks are very similar, that it's still the responsibility of an inclusion committee to identify obstacles to inclusion and come up with strategies to address them. It's still the responsibility of the inclusion committee to publicize the synagogue's efforts towards inclusion, and that's publicizing it both within and outside of their community, weaving inclusive practices into the regular routines, and eliciting feedback from people with disabilities. So those practices are all the same. But now we've started to wonder, do you need to expand your inclusion committee? Is it important to recruit people with different skill sets? One of the things we're finding is that the level of technology that we're all being asked to use is at a level that some people are comfortable with. Some people have been using remote technology all along. And for some of us, this is brand new, that we've never done it at this level before. So thinking about maybe inviting new members on the committee, make use of your college kids who are computer geeks that are home and have a lot of time on their hands, or congregants who work in the area of technology and were involved in other areas of your congregation, but maybe you can now get them on board helping in areas related to inclusion. When you think about people that you've always counted on in your inclusion committee, your go-to people, what if they're not available in the same way? What if those are now the people that are in that list we just looked at who are now part of the community we need to take care of in a different way? So there's new questions to think about and new ways to think about how the inclusion committee is going to function during this stay at home. Okay? So that led me to question number 3. One of the things we were so excited about is that so many synagogues had been updating their websites before the pandemic started, and inclusion was a prominent place, had a prominent place on the websites. You went to synagogue websites and there was a tab, there was a link, there was something that let you know that they were part of the inclusion project, or that there were tools available. You clicked on it, you knew exactly what was there. Well, this is a loaded question because I don't really know how personally to update a synagogue's website, and I don't know what is involved, but I do know that when you go and look at many synagogues' websites, they've been updated to reflect the fact that we are now working remotely. And you go to a synagogue website and there's a lot of information about how to get to services, how to get to your religious school, what social events are being offered, what educational opportunities there are. And the question we want synagogues to keep, in their head is, what happened to all the information about inclusion? We're seeing that for many websites, that piece of it is no longer as visible or prominent or relevant. And we want to make sure that when you're updating your website, and this is not an accusation, this is so new for all of us, and we're figuring it out together. How can you do both? How can you have all of the information about the way your synagogue is functioning completely differently than it had in the past, and still keep inclusion as a prominent feature for those people that are going to be looking for that information? So thinking about that, this question is exactly the same as it was back in November when we did this kind of presentation. How do you do reach out to families with and people with disabilities? It's the same exact question, and the advice that Gateways would give you is still to really rely on some personal outreach. There's nothing wrong with mass emails. We'll talk about that in a moment too. But when you're targeting a population that unfortunately is often used to hearing, no, this isn't really appropriate, or no, we don't have the resources, or that reaching out to them either through a personalized email or a phone call to say, hey, have you thought about coming? We'd really like to see you at this event, goes a long way. It ensures you that your inclusion efforts are reaching the right people. It opens up an opportunity to talk about what supports someone might need to participate in an activity, and talk through concerns that people might have. And can't stress enough how important it is that personalized outreach will assure people with disabilities and their families that they are truly wanted and welcomed in the activities that you're planning. The other piece of personal outreach that I really want to mention is we have many people in our community who have either young adult children or brothers, sisters, family members who are living in group homes and not within their house. So how do we also reach out to those people who are now not having their visits with their family members, not going back and forth? Is there a way that perhaps you can connect with those adult homes and services and still make arrangements for people to, Zoom into a service or Kabbalat Shabbat, or in some way help our congregants who are now separated from their family members who would really benefit from our support? How can we help them bridge that communication gap as well? And when you are doing your mass communications, because we do still need to send things out, it's really important that we make sure that these messages are accessible. So just a couple of reminders about using plain language, maybe increasing your font size, making sure you're using high contrast. The font you use should be one that's easily read. Sometimes people like to do really fancy fonts and things to make it decorative, but then it's hard for some people to read and get to the heart of what you're talking about. If you're going to include links to materials, whenever possible, please embed them right within the message. We have so many of our congregants who it's really hard for them to navigate going to different sites and looking for things. And if they feel like it's going to be too many steps, we lose them. And then I'm sure you've seen a lot lately with alternate text, which is basically describing what's in a picture. You see it a lot in social media these days, so you might want to think about including that in your communications as well. Question 5, what kind of training and support can you provide for your clergy and professional staff and lay leaders? These are not normal circumstances. I feel like we can't stress that enough. And we can't assume that everybody who is helping to keep our synagogues going have the background and the tools and the skill set that you need to do all this remotely. We really need to think about supporting our clergy. They are still doing everything that they did as the spiritual leader of your congregation, and now they're having to do it via technology. So how can we help them? How can we help our lay leaders who so want to keep our communities together and inclusive? What kind of support do they need? This is a great time for synagogues to join together and learn from each other. If one synagogue figures out a great way to run Shiva via Zoom, maybe another one has really figured out how to do a Kabbalat Shabbat. And if people share what they're learning, because this is so new for us, it's a way for all the congregations to keep up to speed. Maybe you do need to think about some kind of formal training for your lay leaders, for your people running your services. I know board meetings and things are happening virtually. Maybe it's time to think about bringing someone in who can do some training during that board meeting about how to work the technology piece, how to connect online. It's a very different skill set that you need when you're trying to do everything through a screen, when you may not be able to see everybody who you're talking to. Maybe you feel like your congregation's really got this down. Everybody's got the technology piece. You've pivoted. You've made this move really easily. In the past, we would recommend that congregations bring in, at some point during the year, some training on inclusive practices and how to interact with people with a variety of disabilities. There's no reason that kind of training and support can't continue to happen remotely. We're seeing webinars and learning and professional development opportunities happening every single day, multiple times a day. Maybe this is a time that maybe that's how you feel you can bring your community together to think about supporting the inclusion efforts by doing some remote learning together, so that when we do reopen your buildings, you feel ready to jump right back in. But really thinking about what kind of training and support do your leaders need right now. And then this is, of course, the big question. Are your remote services and meetings accessible? And this is a huge question because it could mean so many different things to so many different communities. Depends on the size, depends on who your congregation is. But thinking about the practices that you used before we shut down to make sure people felt included, and thinking about which of those practices will you still need to do when you're operating remotely, and are there new supports and services that you might need to bring in? One thing that we're seeing is each congregation can only do so much on their own, and it's sometimes helpful if the congregations do advertise other live stream services and events that might be more accessible if your congregation can't meet the needs of all of your congregants all of the time. It's just one thing we're seeing happening more and more, which is really great. Visually, we always talk about how people need visuals. The same people that needed visuals to participate face-to-face need visuals to benefit and participate online. We often recommend that congregations show page numbers or have a schedule posted so that congregants who come to services can easily see where they're up to. When you have people who find it hard to stay focused or need to take frequent breaks, by having those visual clues, allow them to come in and out of your services and still jump right in and feel like they're a part of things. So if you were doing that when you were face-to-face, there's no reason not to do it when you're now virtual. Have it can be next to whoever is leading your services. It can be in back of them. It's something to think about. If it was something your congregation relied on before, how can you bring it in visually? If you provided visual printouts of prayers for non-readers, as you see in the middle of this slide, can you make those kind of resources available to be downloaded so that somebody can download them and have them to follow along from home? Setting matters. For our population who are dealing with intellectual or developmental challenges, it's really confusing to them why they can't go into their synagogues right now. This is a population that actually finds going to services very rewarding. It's part of their weekly ritual. It's very comforting to them, and it's a, you know, they look for routine, and now they don't have it, and it's hard for them to understand that. And you can see in the picture here, this is actually my rabbi who has been Zooming our services from our chapel, and that's great. It provides a background that puts it into context for some of our members. I recognize that not every rabbi or cantor is going to feel comfortable going or able to go into their building to do that, but then you should think about what is your background. If your background is your kitchen, or you know, it could be even more confusing for your congregants that really count on those visual connections, and it might add confusion and prevent them from being able to benefit from your services. We also have accommodations that we need to think about for people who are hearing impaired. These are some of the strategies that we would recommend like before we all started working from home, having an agenda available that you could now, instead of handing it out when someone comes to a meeting, have it available for them to download. And then following up with written summaries and action items. We have to remember that we can't assume that everybody was able to follow along auditorily. We ask participants to, when you're in a meeting, to keep their video on and to introduce themselves before they're speaking. Many of our congregants really count on those facial expressions and the nonverbal clues in order to be able to follow along. At the same time, we ask participants to mute themselves because background noise is really distracting, and only to unmute when it's your turn to talk. In terms of services, we used to ask rabbis to consider printing out copies of this sermon for people that really take in information much better visually than auditorily. So the same thing, is it possible to have it available to be downloaded so that somebody could read through it while you were talking during that part of the service? We have been getting a lot of questions about closed captioning. Clearly, this is a new area for many people. I'll be honest, this is the first time I am doing any kind of webinar with closed caption accompaniment as well. To know that if you're doing a small meeting, Microsoft Teams and Google Hangout, they have closed captioning built in as an option. If you are using Zoom because you're expecting a larger crowd, you can either assign somebody to type the captions, or what we've done tonight is we've contracted with a third-party service so that there is somebody doing our closed captioning along with the conversation that we're doing. We do have some information available for you. Rebecca was going to add it into the chat for anybody who wanted to download that information and have it available to them. Their non-embedded live captions are an option for any platform. And there are some, you know, if your congregation does live streaming, you'll need to contact the provider and make sure your equipment and your setup is available to meet what they're doing. David, were you going to say something?
I just said that Rebecca has shared those resources.
Great.
We've had.
I can't see the chat when I.
Yeah, no, that's fine. And we've had some of that information has been shared on chat already, but we'll be sure to include it as part of the PowerPoint and put it on the RSIP webpage sometime after the webinar.
And for any synagogue that is thinking that they want to do closed caption and they're a little afraid of it, we actually found it was quite easy to set up and implement. I think that the thought of doing it was definitely more fearful than the actual process. It was very painless and easy, and we're really glad that we've been able to offer it tonight, and as with the other webinars that we'll be doing over the next few weeks. You know, there's Mr. Rogers used to talk out loud the things that he did on his show. He once received a letter from a viewer who was blind, who was very worried about his fish, because although he mentioned them once, he hadn't mentioned them in a while, and she was very worried that they weren't getting fed. And so from that moment on, he began to talk about what he did as he was doing it. And that same concept is something that we need to think about now that we are all operating remotely. There are so many people that really benefit from that conversation. It's almost like having an audible id, talking about what you're doing while you're doing it, that you're going to the Ark to take out the Torah, putting things into context for people that need both the visual and the auditory clues. So while you're, and it's new and it's different and it is not necessarily comfortable for all of us, but it's something to think about. It's one thing when you are, you know, on the bima and you've got 4 people up there, and there's back and forth conversation, and you know, maybe the rabbi is calling someone up to take the Torah out of the Ark. But now that clergy are often leading services completely by themselves, perhaps the only person in the room, adding some context to what's going on and talking out loud as you do it is something that is really helpful. And then there's the conversation people have been having about how long do we, is too long. We know that people are exhausted from being on their computer all day now. We're seeing attention spans are really shortened and screen fatigue is way up. And something that we tell educators right now is that it's really okay to put social community ahead of the content. And so that might mean you need to shorten services. You know, what felt comfortable face-to-face with a whole room of people together where you know, people were talking to each other while they're sitting there during services, or, you know, meeting out in the hallway and taking a break together. That's not happening because we're all in our homes. So what was comfortable at 2 hours might really only work for an hour and a half or an hour and 20 minutes now. Building in breaks that for some reason, we all know that there are people that need breaks. And when you're together, it seems very appropriate to get up and excuse yourself and go to the bathroom or take a break. When we're doing bar and bat mitzvah services, we give the kids permission to take a break when they need to. But for some reason, now that we're all online, people are hesitant to do that. There's this feeling of people are gonna know because my name's gonna disappear or my screen is gonna go blank. I mean, I experienced it. I was on a Shiva call 2 weeks ago, and I really just wanted to pop in and give my condolences and, you know, tell this person that I was thinking of them. And then the service started, and I felt like there was no way for me to get, I was on an hour later, I was still on the call because felt like, well, how can I leave? So giving people permission and to say it is okay to take a break, that if you're having a meeting, to build in a break. You would never typically build in a meeting build in a break during a meeting because people would just take them. But you might need to actually structure it right now because people might need that. Oh, good. So question 7. We are talking a lot about being inclusive in our services, in our learning opportunities, in our meetings, but what can your congregation offer your community right now that goes beyond those kind of programming activities? We know that we have congregants who are now isolated, that they are really stressed because they are suddenly their child's sole support. So what can we do beyond the service, the ritual and the learning that we might not have thought about before. Is it possible to set up virtual visits for people who used to be so involved in your synagogue and now are isolated? Or by a socially distant visit to break up a day for a family whose child has now lost all of their support services because they're home and not in school. Maybe a buddy system. I have started to see some congregations that are creating buddy systems where people are assigned someone else, or families are matched up to check in with each other to see what they might need and how you can help them. Gathering information for families and posting these resources in a place that's accessible, as opposed to waiting for someone to ask, goes a long way. A lot of these people who are now need to be on the receiving end of our help they're not sure how to go about asking for it, or it's uncomfortable for them. They've been in the position of the giver and now they need to be the taker. Or a family who is feeling like there's just too much on their plate, doesn't realize that maybe their congregation would be able to help them with those burdens. So creating a web page of resources so that no one has to ask, you will probably get more people that take you up on it. And then when you build in those personal outreaches that we had talked about earlier, you'll really get a sense of what does your congregation need, and how can you jump in to help. Typically, when we do this presentation, we don't really talk about the religious schools because they are kind of their own entity within a congregation when it comes to inclusion. They have many of the congregations that are in this area are already working with gateways, and they're getting support from our coaches. They're getting support from our professional development that we offer. Many of the congregations have hired special educators and inclusion specialists to help them. So we've never really focused on them when we talk about becoming an inclusive congregation. But things are different now. And now we need to also think about the synagogue as an employer, and what responsibility do they have during this pandemic to their employees. And just like this is new for all of us, you can be the most wonderful educator, you can be the most inclusive educator when you're face-to-face, but that doesn't mean it translates to online learning, which is what everybody has now shifted to. Not every ed director or teacher or inclusion specialist has the background to be doing online learning. We have a lot of kids who are used to having an aide or a teen madrich sitting next to them and helping them during class. They don't have that support anymore. So we have synagogues that are doing synchronized learning. We have synagogues doing asynchronized learning. The kids that needed the one-to-one or that extra support aren't getting it right now because they're at home. So we need to find out, what does our education team need as well? And although they've been doing a great job on their own inclusion-wise till now, they might need something different, just like your clergy and lay leaders also need. And so we need to reach out to them and find out, what can we do to help them? We also need to help them manage parent expectations. I was on a call the other night, and the presenter said something which was so profound to me. It was obvious, but hearing it was really helpful. We're not doing distant learning right now. Our religious schools are not doing distant education. That distance learning implies that it was intentional and that it was planned for, and it was a choice. We're doing pandemic learning. We are pivoting on a moment's notice, without the supports and without the time to think through how we'd want to do it. And so helping families manage expectations during this is going to be an important role that the synagogue has to help the education team with as well. What are you going to do for the future? Many of us were in the middle of plans when all of this happened. There were plans for increased support services in a synagogue. There were plans for construction projects. BIM is being lowered and sanctuaries becoming more accessible. And it's really important that those conversations continue. We recognize that cost is more of an issue than ever before. And yet at the same time, if those plans that have already been discussed and shared are suddenly canceled, that sends a message to our congregants who might have been counting on those about importance and priorities. So we need to remember that we are going to return to our physical spaces, hopefully, by the fall. And at that time, we do need to make sure that inclusion is a priority. So we can't stop that planning. And then the last question that we're going to leave you with is, how do you know if you're on track? And you have to ask for feedback. It's the same thing you would have done face-to-face or now that we're virtual, whether you're using a survey tool or reaching out individually, but asking those questions on a regular basis and after specific events. Were the supports we had helpful? Is there something else we should have thought about? Do you feel you can access our services and supports? I mean, that question alone is going to give you a lot of information and answer all these other questions that we've been talking about tonight. And it's more than ever, asking for this feedback is so critical. So at this point, we really wanted to make sure that we had a chance to ask questions. I did get a message that, Rebecca, I'm going to leave it to you to facilitate this, that a participant offered to show what a remote ASL interpreting might look like, which would be really helpful, I think, for people to see.
Yeah, so this is my first time facilitating such a thing, but Noah Bork has offered to demonstrate for us what it's like to have an ASL interpreter.
Should I stop sharing my screen at this point?
I was just about to suggest that, and if you can find oh, yeah, I can see that Noah is already signing for me. If you can't find Noah, I can see some applause as well. That's pretty awesome. So is everyone able to see what that looks like? Awesome. All right. Thank you, Noah. That's wonderful.
Can I ask Noah a question before he disappears? Someone asked me this question and I didn't know the answer. Which is better for a congregation to think about? Doing closed caption or having someone do ASL interpretation live?
Okay, so there's two different questions. One is that a lot of capital D folks are not going to really feel completely comfortable with captioning. Language skills differ, and ASL really puts out a totally different message. So it really depends. I know I hate to say this, but if you're advertising, you need to make a choice before you know who's going to be participating. But if you know who's participating, you really need to figure out what they're most comfortable with. When I'm doing some science stuff or kind of high level stuff, I really prefer the captioning. But if I'm, really getting the feeling of like during a service or something like that, I prefer ASL. So it just kind of depends on who's taking advantage. But I think one thing that's really cheap, if I can just offer, is that you could say, if you feel like you could get an interpreter, but you don't, it's really expensive, so you're not sure, you're not going to pay out if you don't need to, you can always say, ask if an ASL interpreter would be helpful, and that will cut the cost if you don't need it. But if someone requests, you can go forward. It saves a lot of money, and it really shows, you talk about showing, that you're open. It shows that you're aware. I mean, I tell people, just put it on there and tell people that you're open to the discussion is big.
Great. Thank you so much for jumping in. Really appreciate that.
No problem.
I hadn't been looking at the chat because I couldn't see it. So I don't know if there's questions in there
There
Or
were a fair number of questions about ASL and signing and captioning, and Rebecca posted a lot of resources in there. But if there are other questions people have, you can put them into the chat, and we're happy to address them. I think one thing, as that little exchange between Sandy and Noah demonstrated, we're all sort of learning our way here, and as Sandy said at the beginning. And I think you should never be afraid to ask. We're all equally experts and non-experts at the same time. So, so really should not be afraid to ask.
someone just asked if there'll be a training available over the summer as we plan for the fall. What kind of training? So I guess, you know, this would be good information. I know this is something that CJP and the Rudermans were thinking about as well. Perhaps if there's specific topics that you think training over the summer would be helpful in, could you type them into the chat right now? Molly Silver is on the call, and I think she'd be really interested in seeing that information right now as well. In terms of information that was in the chat, you can save the chat. If you're in chat and you hit more, one of the options you get is to save chat. And so anybody who wants the information in the chat should be able to save it right to their computer themselves.
Yeah, it sometimes appears as just 3 dots, and you scroll over it, and you click the more, and it says to save the chat.
And like I said, this is new for all of us. We at Gateways learned the hard way a few weeks ago that if you don't hit save the chat, even if you've been recording it, you lose your chat.
Yes. I will be saving it for sure for this call. So if you don't save it yourself, it will be made available.
Some screen reader uses writing tools. There's questions about that they're finding that the Zoom resources that they've seen aren't really helpful. David, Rebecca, I don't know if either of you have words of wisdom.
There are, I know that the Zoom site is, it does have a lot of tutorial videos, which you can access as well. And they do seem, on certain topics, I think they're pretty good. And on closed captioning, I'm not, I can't judge, you know, about how helpful you'll find them, but they are, we found just when we were doing our own research for how to close caption this session, they were incredibly responsive to our inquiries. So you can certainly reach out directly to the Zoom support staff, and they can help you for sure.
Kim, you had asked about adapting technology to meet the needs of different learning profiles. I don't know if you were on the webinar last week that Shefa, the Shefa School put on. So we do have the, I don't know if I can get to it right now while I'm doing this, but it was a webinar that the Shefa School in New York, which is a Jewish day school for kids with learning disabilities, did a really great webinar on what they've been doing for their students now that they're doing remote learning. And then tomorrow night, also through Prisma, there's a, through Prisma and Gateways, there's another webinar happening about, the Shefa webinar was mostly about synchronized learning. And then tomorrow night is gonna focus a lot, David, correct, on asynchronized strategies. So I'm going to sit on that one tomorrow night, and I can tell you that the one from Shefa had some really great ideas in there as well.
Yeah, they were both organized through Prisma, which is the organization of the umbrella organization of Jewish day schools in North America. So if you go on the Prisma website, you can register for the one tomorrow night, which is at 8 o'clock. which features actually some Gateway staff in addition to a local teacher. And they also will have the recording of the one from the Sheffer School last week. They're focused more on day school for day school teachers, but you know, they're certainly adaptable for religious school environments as well. And Sandy, I don't know if you want to talk at all about what we've been doing for our own students in the GJEP program.
So when this pandemic happened and we had to switch so suddenly, we decided to go with asynchronized learning initially because we felt that our parents were very overwhelmed. Our students really need one-to-one support to be able to learn remotely, and it wasn't something that our parents at the time really had the bandwidth to take on. So we're using a platform called Flipgrid. It is a Microsoft platform. It is free. It is so easy to use. Even those of us that are a little bit technologically phobic found it very simple to figure out, and it's very child friendly. And what we really liked about it for children who have some learning challenges is it's based on recordings. So we can upload documents and video clips and information for them, and we can also record ourselves giving those directions. And then when the students want to respond, a big green button appears on their screen, they click it, and they record their answer. So what's really nice about it is they could do it when somebody had time to help them, but then they could go back and watch these video clips from their friends. And we know that many of them were watching the clips over and over again, and it brought them a lot of comfort. And then as it became clear that this was not going to be just a couple of weeks at home, now we've started to add in some live time meetings with them, being very aware that their attention span is short. So we're doing 30-minute sessions on Zoom, and we're playing around. You know, we're in the same position everybody else is in. We did 3 live sessions on Sunday, and I would say one was good, one was great, and one was you know, we're figuring it out. Rebecca played around and came up with this strategy of sharing in advance reaction cards to the students using board maker symbols. So when she had her whole class on the screen and somebody was sharing or talking, the other kids could hold up a card that communicated with everybody else what they were thinking about. So that was a technique that she thought up on the spot, and it worked really great. We hadn't seen that in any of the webinars that we had taken anywhere. So it's really playing around and trying lots of different things and figuring out what works. We've started doing bar and bat mitzvah tutoring over Zoom with our students, and that's actually going way better than we thought. We're actually finding that one of our students is doing better doing Zoom tutoring than he was ever doing face-to-face. He's being way more productive, and actually has wondered if he could just continue online even when the world goes back to normal. So it's really being willing to brainstorm. I find having a group of colleagues to talk to is really helpful, and we think things through together, and we experiment and we try. Breakout rooms have been really helpful. We did this past weekend, we were able to separate our students with their teen volunteers in a breakout room and give them some of that very small group and one-to-one support that they really needed, and that worked really well in Rebecca's class. Rebecca, I know you texted me, but I didn't see what you said.
Sandy, I just wanted to call your attention to another really good question from Sally Gordon. She asked about that they just formed an inclusion committee and will be reaching out to the congregation, but what additional follow-up should go after that congregational letter?
So I'm assuming, Sally, that means you're at the beginning steps with the Ruderman Synagogue Inclusion program. So you'll send out that letter, you'll get some information. back. Molly, please jump in if you feel like you can answer this question. I think what every congregation is going to need to do is they're going to get a lot of information. They're going to get a lot of competing interests from within their congregation, and then they're going to have to set some priorities. They're going to have to figure out what is their budget, what is, we were actually doing this in my congregation last week, and conversations around, well, what are the things we are not willing to budge on, that they just absolutely have to happen? What are the things that are safety? In my congregation, we figured out that we've got kind of a safety issue in terms of if we ever had to evacuate our building very unexpectedly. So that bumps, for many people, high on the list. There's going to be, so many possibilities that a congregation could do, and then have to, again, prioritize. What do we have the money for? What is going to help the most people in our congregation? And I think that's a very individual process for each community to start prioritizing where they go next. But Molly, do you want to jump in on this one?
No, I think you said that very well. And Sally, feel free to email me tomorrow. We can set up a time to talk personally. Thank you. This has been amazing. I just want to give a huge shout out to you, Sandy, and to David for putting on this phenomenal webinar. And I would personally be very interested to know from everybody here what other kinds of topics you would like to cover in the future, because we would love for this to be an ongoing series. So thank you.
Kim, I've been looking for the link to the webinar from the Sheffield School, and I'm having trouble finding it while I'm on this, but I will absolutely find it and send it to you, because I know I did it. I did it the other day on a call. I don't know why I can't do it now. But I will find that link again. Is there anything that we've missed in the chat? Because I'm going to be honest that it's been hard for me to keep my eye on the chat.
I don't think we missed. I don't know if you saw anything, Rebecca, come through that I may have missed. As I said, we'll be posting the chat, so people can certainly can flip through if there, because there are resources shared there. And we'll try to put together on a page too some things for the specifically on the closed captioning.
And I did see that Noah jumped back in and made a comment that interpreters would use better lighting, darker shirts, and a better. So he put in some great tips there if you are going to go the route of having an ASL interpreter.
Also, Kim Bodemar had asked a question about adapting technology to meet the needs of all different students. And of course, we could do an entire presentation on that. And I think tomorrow night that's kind of what that's going to be about.
Yes. Yes.
Give me 2 more seconds. Let me see if someone else talk, and let me see if I can find that link, because so many people.
Well, as Sandy is looking for that link, because it was a terrific presentation by Shefa, and I must say the one tomorrow night will be terrific as well, specifically for school teachers. I do want to, of course, thank Sandy for her tremendous, the information that she shared, the insights that she shared, and I hope that when you leave tonight, you feel energized to do even more than you're already doing. I know congregations are really stepped up in this age when it's very difficult to form that sense of human connection, and congregations have really done a tremendous job, and there's always more to do. So we hope that that's one of the key takeaways you leave with tonight, that there's always more to do. I want to, of course, thank again the Ruderman Synagogue Inclusion Project and CJP and Molly Silver for this opportunity to speak with you all. Someone had asked about if we're going to do some later sessions in the summer, and we are exploring that for sure, especially as we approach high holidays and people are thinking about, are we going to have to do some things virtually, or are we going to do everything virtually? How are we going to be able to include all of our congregants in a way that everyone feels as comfortable as possible. So we are exploring that. So certainly keep your eyes peeled. If we do anything, Molly will be sure to flood your inboxes with information about it. Eileen, do you want to put in the
Yeah,
chat
I noticed, I had a question. I noticed a couple other people asking, you're
Yep.
talking about a session tomorrow night, and a bunch of us have not received any of that information. So is it
Right.
possible
So this is through, the reason why is because it's through Prisma, which is the day school organization. So it's really
Okay.
intended. It's the primary audience is day school teachers, but good education is good education. I think it would be fine, really, for a if there's Hebrew school teachers that are interested in joining, just go to the Prisma website and look up. You can probably just do a search for gateways and the webinar will come up. It's called Building Inclusive Classrooms, I believe, or something to that, engaging through inclusive classrooms.
Mia and I just shared the link in the chat just now.
Oh, perfect. All right. Thank you, Rebecca. So I can always count on Rebecca to be much faster than I am.
Oh, yes.
So with that, I think we'll close the session. As I said, it will be recorded. The recording will be shared. So if there are people in your own congregations or congregations you know that are interested in getting information that we shared tonight, please have them access the recording and the chat and the other resources that we'll have up there. So again, thank you all for joining us tonight. We really enjoyed sharing with you.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.